Good evening everyone, and thanks for having me. I feel a bit inadequate because there's people in this room with a lot more experience on the Gawler part of things than I've got. Bruce is here, John Batters, Peter Jones, John Schultz, Trevor Bain and others of you that I probably don't know. But however, I'll give it my best shot, and we're not confining it just to Gawler because I think to tell this story we've got to bring it right into up to 2015, what's happening in the state. People have been gambling since as far back as time. Back in the Roman chariot days, they had bookmakers and so forth and so on. People gamble, some say I don't gamble, but you find out they've got shares, and so, you know, the highest percentage of the population do some sort of gambling. Betting on English horse racing can be factually traced back to the mid-1700s. In the 1770s, a chap called Richard Tattersall, who was a professional stud groom, formed Tattersall's, who eventually became the home of large-scale betting, and today are very big in Australia, owning Unitab and the lotteries Australia-wide, etc. By 1830s, there was a lot of skullduggery in horse racing. Britain was the gambling capital of the world, and interesting, at Epsom Derby in 1830, they had the first known ring-in being the horse that was meant to be running in the race. It wasn't that horse at all, but it was some other nag. And in those days, the Epsom Derby was a public holiday in England, and today there's only two public holidays for horse racing. One's the Melbourne Cup and the other's the dubious honour of the Adelaide Cup. But nowhere else in the world is there a public holiday for horse race. I mentioned the ring-in scandal of the Epsom Derby, and what came out of that really was lots and lots of regulations and lots of policing. Horse jockeys started wearing colours to distinguish them, and they started to bring the game into a bit of repute rather than ill repute. Whatever your opinion of bookmakers, if you go over the whole gambit, our origins have been nothing less than remarkable. We've endured a lot of change over a lot of years. So, I'll talk about SP bookies for a second. SP stands for Starting Price Bookmaker. They were illegal, but they were very popular in the community. If a horse on a racetrack might have been $12 and the people on the racetrack backed that horse into $6, then the starting price was $6. So all these illegal bookmakers, if you back that horse with them, that's what you would get. You would get $6, nothing better. Pre-bookmakers in South Australia, these SP bookmakers bet on interstate races, and where there were bookmakers and there were dividends declared, and they bet on those. It was pretty popular. And they would pay out on the results that would be paid in the following day in the paper. Most hotels in Gawler and other places had SP bookmakers, usually one in the front bar, usually one in the saloon bar, and if the pub was big enough they'd have one somewhere else. The railways in Gawler had its share of SP bookmakers, as did a couple of other manufacturing places in Gawler, because people loved to have a bet. There was a bloke in one of the pubs used to have a needle, and he used to write the customers' bets on lolly biscuits, a biscuit with a nice and tight back on it. And the object there was that if he got raided, he'd just lick the biscuits and they'd have nothing on it. In those early days, it was the police that raided were called the flying squad. I don't know the history of that. There were other SP bookmakers who, shall I say, had a position in society or had too much to lose, so they'd get someone to sit next to them and take the bets. So while they'd control the business, if they were caught, it's the bloke they were paying next to that would take the rap and they would escape the thing. Not uncommon, I'm just trying to chase a name up that I had, but there was one bloke at the family hotel that was known one day they did get raided by the flying squad, and he just screwed up all the betting slips and ate them on paper. And I've heard that story before, that wasn't uncommon. Overall, the authorities weren't very serious about SP bookies. Their main crime was they didn't pay any taxes and they dealt in cash, and not much of that cash ever saw the bank. The bigger SP bookmakers in those days, when we only had landlines, had to pay and these are the bigger SP bookies, they had to pay a person to go down to the racecourse, ring them before every race on a public phone outside the racecourse, see if they needed any business done on the course, then they'd run inside, do the business with the legal bookies, and that went on and on and on, and then between themselves they would just use the landline and lay off with each other. There was a bloke called, I think it was Jeff Dunn at the Kingsford Hotel, and he had to attend a wedding one day, so off he went to the wedding and got another bloke who won't let me name him, but he's confessed, to run his business for the day. And he got skunned, and that was the end of that SP book. He got cleaned up something big that day and couldn't pay all the debts. The biggest problem with SP bookmaking was people not wanting to pay their debts. And so it was easy to have a bet, but with some people paying was a separate issue, and there were a lot of bad debts in the game. And I was talking to someone earlier today, there was a successful business, not necessarily a successful businessman, basically in Gawler, basically ended up in the hands of the receivers because the owner was just hopeless on betting and owed SP bookmakers around the traps and in due course on-course bookies. Most SP bookmakers settled Friday night in the pubs. Others had people go out and settle at people's houses. Henry Weaver was a classic. He lived opposite the Hutchinson Hospital, probably the biggest SP bookie in Gawler, one of the biggest. And I spoke to the bloke that used to go out and do a run, and he'd go around to people's houses and pay them or take money off them and go back and settle with Henry Weaver. The interesting thing with Henry was that he was secretary for many, many years of the Gawler Harness Racing Club. It might be called Trotting Club then, but it's the same thing. And Henry always had a problem that the South Australian Trotting Club was controlled by owners and trainers. And his attitude was, we're not going to be controlled by owners and trainers up here. So in the wash, they had 7, there was 10 on the committee, 7 of them were SP bookies. So they made their mark. Some people ran place cards and they'd have kids going around on a bike, calling into people's houses, picking up their place card and their shilling or 2 shillings, however much they wanted to bet. And again, they'd have to ride around after the race meeting and settle those debts. Obviously, with a place card, they collected off more houses than they ever had to visit to pay. So SP bookies actually got stronger. In 1934, legal bookmakers were legalised, and there were 400 bookmakers in the first intake, August the 1st, 1934. There was 3 from Gawler. That's slide 1, please. Most of them, and I'm not suggesting the Gawler ones, but most of them were SP bookies that turned legal. And those 3, Wally Paternoster got a city licence. From what I can work out, that was Beaton, or was it the Austral Hall or something it was called, or the Forester Hall? Forester. Right. And the bloke down the bottom, the best I can work out is that's where the BP garage is now. So they were in the first licence intake, they were legal, and the only thing I can trace up that Wally Paternoster in his first year turned over £13,000, which was big money in 1934. I don't know whether he won or lost. Races in those days were mainly held Wednesdays and Saturdays, and the racing industry basically had the gambling dollar to itself, and the government took 2% turnover tax. New Zealand started off-course total types of betting in 1952. Australia was typically slow, and every state had a royal commission into TAB, so every state covered the same ground. Every state had junkets to New Zealand for the people on the committees to investigate it. And Victoria finally opened in 1961, off-course totes, and South Australia in 1967. Interesting, if I can have slide 2, thanks. In 1962 in New South Wales, Justice Kinsella made the following conclusions and observations in New South Wales. There were about 6,000 SP bookmakers operating, no tax or help to the industry of course. He assessed the turnover at £278 million. So that equates to $546 million in 1962, so if anyone wants to have a guess how much money that would be today, just incredible money. 1965 saw the lotteries commence, and we'll talk about these other things later. I think it's too confusing just to go in order. 1967, as I said, saw the off-course TAB. 1985 saw the casino commence. 1994 saw poker machines commence in South Australia. Slide 3, please. The commencement of these mediums obviously started to erode the racing dollars, but by the same token there just seemed to be a great lift in gambling in itself, so the setback wasn't huge, but they did suffer. In 1984 bookmakers got telephones, so on course you could take bets over the phone. That was the death knell for SP bookmakers then. Not many survived after that time because people ring up their bookie and have a legitimate account with their bookmaker. And it was probably a long overdue thing. A lot of people couldn't get to the track in those days. And were betting illegally, so why not have them betting legally? The bookmaker could only take a phone bet in those days while he was on the track. So once he drove into the car park, he could start answering the phone. And today, the bookmaker can take bets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if so licensed. In 2000, saw the Northern Territory Government licensed what we call corporate bookmakers. Ladbrokes, William Hills, etc. These people bet on races all around Australia. They paid absolutely nothing to the industry. So they were having a field day and offered all sorts of incentives for people to bet with them. Slowly but surely, the individual authorities in each state woke up to this and put their heads together and came up with a Racefields publication fee. To sum that up, what happens today is that doesn't matter where it is in Australia, if a bookmaker holds $100 on a South Australian event, he has to pay the South Australian Racing Authority. Vice versa, if I go to the races tomorrow and hold money on Victoria and New South Wales, I have to pay the equivalent of 1% to each of those states. So the South Australian industry only get money out of bets laid on South Australian product. It was a bonus for South Australia because of the population in New South Wales and Victoria. They actually gained. So when settling time comes at the end of each month, South Australia, through the tab, have to send money to New South Wales, Victoria, etc. But in return, they get far bigger checks back. So they're a good exporter and make a lot of money out of that. So Raceford legislation's worked, and worked particularly well for South Australia. These corporate bookmakers have made big inroads into the turnover dollars previously held by on-course bookmakers and TABs. They've made such inroads that the TABs haven't got a smile on their face anymore. They are doing it hard. And the main players are Paddy Power, Irish, William Hill, Ladbrokes and Bet365 from England, and Bet365 American based. So they're all overseas. In 2000, Betfair, which I don't know that I mentioned, but you've all heard of Betfair. Betfair merged with Paddy Power, so they've become the world's biggest. Tasmania licensed Betfair Australia, and they have now just recently combined with Crown Bet, so they're a bigger player now in Australia, and they're up there with the size of the other corporates. It's very interesting that, and for those that don't know, Betfair is a betting exchange. To me, I don't agree with it. The downside is that you can back something to win, but you can also back something to lose. So, a lot of people involved in that. A jockey can be involved and not let his horse win. A trainer can get up in the morning and know his horse isn't too good, and he can get on Betfair and lay that horse knowing it can't win to the unsuspecting people that think it can win. So I don't like the idea, but anyway it exists. The Western Australian government didn't like the idea, and they barred it. Betfair appealed that with the High Court, and they claimed that that's contravened Section 92 of the Constitution, which Bruce would know about, and basically it imposed a burden of interstate trade, was protectionist in nature, and Section 92 basically says that Victoria can't keep South Australian out, and you can just trade anywhere, and sometimes the conditions are better for someone from another state than they are for that people in that particular state. So Western Australia lost that, and Betfair's now alive and kicking there too. I think I'll just run through some total. I can't slide 4, please. In 1997, the total wagering, when I talk wagering, I'm talking sports and, no, wrong one, number 4. No?
Back the other way.
No. Can I say that other again?
Number 3.
Number.
Oh, back.
Your total wage, yeah. Go the other way. There, stop. No,
Number 3.
back one.
Back one.
Righto. You'll see there in 1997-98, total wagering, and that's, as I said, betting on horses, dogs, greyhounds and sport, was 597 million. In 2014-15, 28,459 million, 150% increase in wagering alone in the country. Just like to brief on some other gambling, just fill you in on some figures here. The South Australian lotteries, there was a referendum held in 1965 on the establishment of a state lottery. In November 1966, the bill was passed to establish the Lotteries Commission. In May 1967, the traditional 50-cent lottery ticket went on sale, and the first lottery was drawn, by those that remember, the Honourable Frank Walsh. July 1967, a dollar lottery was launched, and over the next 2 years, different values right up to $20 were introduced. March 73, Saturday Cross Lotto, picking 6 from 32 numbers at 25 cents a ticket was introduced. February 1981, all the states combined the pools so that it was a bigger pool and bigger prize payout. November 1984, they went computerised. April 07, and it took that long to increase the age for people that could buy lotteries from 16 to 18. Up until 2007, 16-year-old kids could buy lottery tickets. Now they can't. It took a long time to get that changed. And the fine now is $5,000, and there's no record ever of anyone ever being fined. March 08, Keno moved into selected TAB outlets. It's all been bought out by TaxBet now, and it's only a matter of time before all TAB outlets have a full range of the lotteries product. Can I have number 5, please? So there's the figures that the South Australian lotteries, they've paid $5 billion in prizes since their formation. The hospitals have reaped $2 billion, and then $9 million has gone to recreation and sports. So that's their history up to June 2015. I'll move on. The casino, 10th largest employer in South Australia. They pay around $30 million in wages and $19 million in taxes annually. 1991, they refurbished the south side area for poker machines. 2002, they did a major refurbishment on the ground floor on the north side, and they have made major alterations every year, be it a gaming room, a restaurant, a bar area or an outdoor area. But they have spent millions of dollars on refurbishment, and now, as we all know, slide 6 please, now as we all know, they're going for about a $300 million upgrade. I might be going too quick here. Poker machines. Poker machines are programmed to return 87.5% to players, which in itself seems reasonable, but on the basis of turnover, it's not that reasonable. They came to South Australia in 1994, and they have, I haven't contradicted my figure here, they have generated $5.7 billion for the South Australian government. Although I said 87.5% return to player, the actual dollars in, the government averaged 50 cents in the dollar. Two up can be traced back to the 18th century, and it was usually 1 up because they started the whole thing using 1 coin for many years. By the 1850s, the 2-coin version was in play. In Australia, it was big in the goldfields and could be spread across the country. 2-up was played extensively in the First World War by Australian soldiers and became a regular feature on Anzac Day, although illegal at other times. And I haven't checked, but I think it's still legal on Anzac Day to play 2-up. There were illegal 2-up schools. They probably, overall, they went into decline in the 50s when these illegal houses started having baccarat tables and stuff like that. progressed on from two-up, and those that went to the casino in the early years, they had a two-up ring. That's long since gone. It's just not a game that people really enjoy anymore. The Williston Hotel is alleged to have had a two-up game going every Sunday morning. Anyone know about it? And down to the packing sheds on Two Wells Road, they moved around amongst the packing sheds, and they'd have a cockatoo out the front. The cockatoo was the bloke that kept Nick and warned if anyone was coming. And they tell me those schools were successful for many years. Now, I probably haven't run my full course but I didn't want to get too involved either.
No, keep going.
I'd rather have questions.
Keep going.
Okay?
Yeah, you've got plenty of time.
Yeah, I know I've got time, but it's starting to get too involved, so I'd really rather take questions now. Yep.
Yeah, it's during that time when there's a lot of debt being incurred early on, was there any evidence of strong arm tactics being employed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just repeat the question, please.
Right. The question was, were the SP bookies, and probably licensed bookies too, were there any strong arm tactics used to get the money? Well, the answers are very clear, yes. Yeah, there were people certainly paid to go and collect and make an offer that the person that owed the money couldn't refuse.
Would a pokies machine have a computer in it so the government get their right money?
Oh yes, they've got meters and they've got security tags on them, and they come around and check them. I can tell you, and we had them in our hotel, you cannot beat a poker machine. Either playing it or receiving money by it.
Warren, in New South Wales and Victoria, the poker machines are in sporting venues. In South Australia, they're at private hotels. Why did we go down that path?
Did everyone hear?
Pressure, absolute pressure from the Hotels Association, which was very proactive. And the interesting thing in South Australia, and nobody could understand it, the sporting clubs weren't very interested in the beginning. And when they sort of got interested, I guess I'd say, is the Hotel Association really had a good foothold in. And I think it's fair to say that the sporting clubs in New South Wales, and you can start with, what's the one Bradley works at? You can start with Rudy Hill, which is just the most enormous complex, and they've got 550 poker machines. But those sporting clubs were, by and large, much bigger than anything we had here. And I think that the sporting clubs looked at it and compared with the New South Wales ones and said, oh, that's not for us. But the Hotel Association got a foothold in. And it's interesting that the ones that got it in, the three blokes I'd put at the top of doing it, have got around everything all the way down the line. And, you know, there was a law you couldn't have more than 40 poker machines, but there was no law that said you couldn't have 10 venues. And that's what the three biggest players in the hotels have done. They've got so many hotels that they have got 300 and 400 pokies each. Yeah, it might be, I don't know how pubs wouldn't have lasted without them, but having said that, it would have been fairer perhaps for the sporting clubs.
Advertising is a big thing with pubs and one thing and another. I remember not that long back where they had meals, but they'd give you a $2 discount off that, hoping you'd spend it in their poker machines.
Yeah. Well, the revenue was that good. And everyone seems to do business that days. I mean, we go back to corporate bookmakers, you know, they make some futile offers, but the public fall for it and they think it's terrific. You know, if your horse runs second, you'll get your money back. And if you read the fine print, it says up to $25. They don't cater for anyone that has a serious bet. They don't want anyone. I have got some other notes for a conclusion, but keep it.
Now that you can bet online for anything that moves, where does that leave the professional bookmaker like yourself?
Could you repeat that, please?
Is there room for you to still make profit?
question is, because you can bet online and do this and do that, is there any room left for bookmakers on course like myself? And I'm going to cover that in a minute, but I'll briefly. Now, yes, there is, because bookmakers like myself take on the bigger professional punters, and the corporate bookmakers won't touch them. In fact, they close their accounts.
Is there an explanation as to why TAB left South Australia, went to Queensland?
You wouldn't want to hear my explanation. The TAB was valued by a valuer at $110 million. And the government paid the valuer $7 million for his valuation. When it went on the market, I think Armitage might have been in government then or something, would that be right, Bruce? Anyway, and Queensland TAB got interested. They said, you've made a mistake here because you're GST free while the South Australian government own it. Once we buy it, it's got to pay GST. That affects the bottom line, so it's only worth 28 million. And it was sold for 28 million. And the sad part about that was that they paid it off in less than 5 years out of unclaimed dividends and the fractions on a bet. And when I say fractions, remember how I said they divvy up the tickets into the pool? Well, if that comes to $2.31, that's not a good figure. If that comes to $2.29, they pay $2.25. So they keep the 4 cents fraction on each unit, and they use that money and uncollected money, and they paid the 28 million in less than 5 years. It was a gimme.
How does, is there any noticeable increase in betting from Southeast, from Asia, as far as into Australia?
When we got is there any betting from Asia into Australia? When we got telephone betting in 1984, there were big Asian syndicates that started betting. And we had an auditorium down at Morphettville, and we had about 5 or 6 large bookmakers formed a conglomerate to take them on. This particular lot didn't pay.
What do you mean to take them on? I don't understand.
They said they'd accept their bets,
Okay.
right? They'd accept their bets. So they took their bets, and the Asians lost a lot of money, but they didn't pay. And a well-known bookmaker, I'll name him, Michael Webster, got on a plane. He said, well, I'll go over and get the money. And he got back there and was suggested he got on the next plane back to Australia and never got any money. So to bring that forward now, the Asians have got their own betting exchange, and they're not interested in asking us. I'll mention later, a lot of our players are on their exchange. Yes, sir?
For an SP to exist for any length of time, he would have been paying the local police sergeant or the police hierarchy a fee. Do you have any idea what sort of money they would have had to have been paying to the local sergeant or hierarchy?
I haven't got any figures.
This is 70 years ago.
But we know favours were done, and they looked the other way, and you know, bookmaker A would look after the local sergeant and also suggest that bookmaker B's operating down the road, you might want to pay him a visit. So I don't know what sort of money, but it happened, yeah, absolutely.
And apparently when the SPs died away, the prostitutes got a double handle with these taxes. There's less revenue to get.
Just quick, going back to the SP.
You stand up, right?
I did a little bit of homework before we come to the meeting tonight. Not me, the room. We talk about Walter Paternoster, who was the Wally Paternoster. Back in 1929, he was the chap that was charged for the Criterion Hotel SP bookmaking. And it was a set-up job from Constable Kaya and Turco, and it showed that he was the parlour of the hotel with a number of men. The constables arrived on the scene, he looked up and recognised the cop, he said, this is civil, and he was gone. The descendant was seen with a book and a pencil in his hand, cost him £50 in 1929. And then
Just
from,
let me repeat that for a minute. So I showed you the name Wally Paternoster on the screen a while ago. This gentleman said in 1929 he got caught in the Criterion Hotel, got fined £50.
right, and the other thing, the numbers of the street there is actually before the change of the numbers
Oh,
up the side there.
yeah,
So
yeah, they
they could
could-
have asked him whereabouts is it.
Right.
And the other one was the first betting shop was in Foresters Hall, which you've got here. And then that was in 1934 was the first one. And in 1939 was the first tote stabiliser here in Gawler. Built it out of the chip chat that he had at home, and that was the first tote. And that was 1939, trotting track.
Oh, at the trotting track,
Yeah.
on course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was-
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Just thought it was a matter of interest.
No, that's good.
On top of that, I worked with the post office in the 1950s and 60s, and I remember a lot of telegrams used to come through for certain individuals in Gawler who had to deal with horse racing. And our job was just to deliver them, and I was saying that, deliver telegrams.
Is that right?
was my grandfather.
Can you stand up while you're talking so everyone can hear, please?
All right, William Paternoster was my grandpa and we lived with him. And so every Saturday we weren't allowed to use the phone because he was taking beds. And Henry Wee was my great uncle, so they were sort of in the woods together. And the police in Gawler knew about them, but they turned a blind eye. But one day Elizabeth Cox got wind of it and they came to Gawler to do a raid, and they raided my uncle. He had nothing to do with it, they raided his house.
Wrong uncle.
Oh, they raided the wrong house.
Yeah.
That was often done. That was
Yeah.
often done. In later years, of course, you could be an SP bookie and sit out the front of your house with a mobile phone.
Yeah.
Yep.
At the racetrack, many years ago when I went there, probably with my parents, there was chapters like you there, about 3 or 4. They had boards up with the horses or something on there. And did the bookmakers also call out to advertise their prices or something?
Oh, yeah, you would say. So the favourite was 8 to, what was it in those days? 8 to 11 on, and the second one was 5 to 1.
Yeah.
The bookie had called out 5 to 1, bar 1 and all that. And it was all a lingo that in those days everyone on the course understood. If I called that out today, when I look at me, I what the hell is he talking about? And, you know, it's interesting you bring that up. If you go back to those days and a bookmaker put up a good price, the favourite perhaps, people would jump over each other to get a bet on. You would see a bloke here and a bloke there, and someone would come over the top with 300 or 400 to get on. I find it, and I still haven't come to grips with it now, but I'll be at the Port Lincoln Cup tomorrow, and they will queue up in an orderly line to have a bet. No atmosphere, there'll be no pushing and shoving, they'll just line up like they do at the tab and wait. I feel like yelling out, push and shove, will you?
But these tickets were about 2.5 inches by about 3 or 4 inches.
That's right.
And they were brown, had brown marks or something inside them or something.
They did.
And the bookie would put his
Initial
price or something on
He
it.
had put the initials of the horse and the dividend.
That's right.
Well, we've gone computerised now.
Yeah.
I might be the only bookie now, but I've just had Bunyip print me some of those tickets because I still use them for my doubles.
If someone had collected some of those tickets and kept them today, would they be worth anything?
So someone would buy them. But
Yeah.
we printed, Joy and I printed some Black Caviar tickets and handed them out when Black Caviar came. And a lot of people have still got them, kept them. Yes?
I may have missed it, but did the soldiers play two-up during the war? Because you made the comment that they're not allowed to play two-up on Anzac Day.
They are allowed to.
They are, aren't they? Yes.
Yeah, they did in the war, sure.
Right.
And Anzac Day now they can.
Yeah.
So we can have a little thing here in the hall. So,
Yeah, I remember as a lad riding on the train, coming home from school, all the fellas from the factory used to play penny poker all the way home on the train.
all right.
Comment there?
Well, they are. And that was be over an hour, that trip, wasn't it?
Yeah. I know they're
Play
cards now.
Play penny pay. Times have changed, yes, sir.
How did they deal with match fixing before the government really got involved? Like, did that?
Can I cover that in a minute?
Oh, sure.
Remind me.
Yeah, I was just seeing some old movies from England. You see the bookies doing hand signals to each other.
Tic-tacking?
Yeah, do they do that here? They don't.
I wouldn't even know what they're doing. But you've got to remember, John, in fairness, one of the reasons they don't do it now is there's not many people on the track.
Yeah.
There's not many bookies. We've now got computers, so it's not hard for me to know what the bloke next to me is doing. But I've never seen tic-tacking in Australia, but when I first worked on the course for bookmakers, and there was 40-something in the grandstand, 40-something in the flat, and 36. So what's that add up to? That adds up to nearly 160 bookies on the racetrack. And we're going back
50 years.
65 or something, yeah. A lot of bookies, the bigger bookies, would have a runner, and he would be running around and telling them what's going on, but no one here was smart enough to do the old tic-tacking. Anyone else? Or no?
Warren, just one thing. Could you explain the all-up betting, and is it still utilised? Is it still popular or not?
Can you repeat?
The question is all-up betting, and is it still popular? Well,
what's an example?
So an all-up bet is picking a horse in race 2 and having $10 on it, and all the winnings go on something in race 4.
Ah.
That's an all-up bet. Now, I've got a couple of customers that come and do it, mainly racehorse trainers who have to go back to the stalls. They'll come, but the way our computer system is these days, you have to put the first bet on, and you can't do much, and you've got to wait for that result before you can put the second bet on. But you can still quote them and all up. But then I run a double at the races, and that's the other version of an all-up bet, is you simply walk up to the doubles board and pick a horse in any 2 races. And, you know, I might have sixes that, and I might have 10s, the one they like in that race. They might want $100, so 6 times 10 is 60, at 100 is $6,000 they're up to win if they... And a very interesting story, let me tell you. Someone had a bet at Melbourne Cup Day, and the tab, New South Wales tab, did all-up. They do all-ups, the tabs do, and this bloke picked 4 horses. The first 3 won, so he did something I've never heard of before, but tabs and the corporates do, and that is he cashed out. 2 sad things. One is what I just mentioned about all-up. The cash out figure under an all-up thing would have been $1,800, and the tab paid him $461. I'm not ashamed to say he was robbed. The second sad part of the story is the last one won. It was Pride of Penzance, and his ticket was $138,000.
Oh.
And I showed Joy, I had it on my phone, the ticket for ages, and the blokes walked home with $461. Crazy. Yes, sir.
I remember years ago, my mum used to listen to the radio, and the horse racing was on Saturday afternoon, and she'd have the paper there, and she'd mark about 4 or 5, and 3 or 4 of these had come home, and I must have been about 5, 6 weeks she was doing that. One day she got the bright idea, I'm going to put some money on this. She put some money on it, and they sat there Saturday afternoon, listened to the radio, and nothing happened. They didn't come anywhere.
The worst thing you can do as a punter is win on your first bet. Then you're hooked. If you lose on your first bet, you think twice.
The old trifecta.
I know my mum used to have a few bets, and Dad would say, I'll put them on, and I know. I learned years later, I went straight in his back pocket.
Someone won.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was telling a story earlier. I had an uncle in Melbourne, was an SP bookmaker, and I was 12 years old. So on Wednesday, I wasn't allowed in what was the lounge room, but the phone kept ringing and ringing and ringing. and I was too naive to know what was going on. On the Friday, he went down to Nat Taylor's place, got in an old comma van, a two-door sliding door van, with dry cleaning in the back, and we drove all around the districts delivering dry cleaning. And you know, it took me all day to work out that he took a blue suit in and he bought a blue suit out. He was just paying or receiving money. Beautiful. A bit slow. Dad did fill me in a few years later. Look, in conclusion for me, today's problems facing the wagering industry are people betting online overseas, which you alluded to. Is that right? That's what you were alluding to? Sorry?
Sorry?
What was your question before?
I was asking about match fixing.
Right. So today's problem facing the industry is people betting online overseas. We're all making submissions to the Treasurer about this, and when I say all, the corporate bookmakers, the tabs, and the on-course bookmakers. Unfortunately, the federal government talk to the banks, and the banks say, no, it's too hard, too hard, too hard. So, as we speak, nothing's happened. They've done it in America, and they believe they've cut online overseas betting by 80%. France claimed between 70 and 80%. Good old Australia, it's too hard at this stage. So they've just made banking laws to stop it happening. Another problem is credit betting. So the corporates let people bet on credit. Of course they get in trouble, but the corporates don't muck around. They, legally, but they end up getting their money. Tabs don't give credit. On-course bookmakers give credit. And that's a historical thing. And I say historical because if you go back to when bookmakers started, you couldn't expect some of the big punters around to take cash to the track and get robbed, and you couldn't expect bookmakers to take enough cash to the course to cover those big bets, and they get robbed. So what they used to do was meet in the Tattersalls Club every Monday and settle. So it's a bit historical betting on credit with on-course booking. I've spoken to Robbie Cook from Unitab and the CEO of Tabcorp, and they're not the least bit worried about on-course booking still giving credit, but they are determined to stop the corporates giving credit, and they've tried to say to the government, if you don't stop it, we'll start giving credit and then the problem will multiply. So who knows where that will go to. The third problem, this more addresses what you say. TABs and on-course bookmakers are fighting the fact that corporate bookmakers want in-play betting. Now, there's no integrity in sport now. And why do I say that? I say that because my phone will ring on Thursday night and someone will want to take $1.60 Hawthorn. And I'm thinking, why would you want to take $1.60 Hawthorn? Sure enough, you take the bet, by Friday night you find out that the two best Geelong players aren't playing. And these people know this long before the betting provider knows it. We've written to the AFL about it. They want to get money out of the bookies. We've said, well, put some integrity into what you're doing and you'll pay your money. But at the moment, there's just too many leakage of who's not playing and who is. There's match fixing. Can you put up slide 10, please? See here, the whole gaming market, so that's wagering and gaming. Casinos, poker machines and lottery make up 86% of the turnover. The wagering market is only 14%. Of that 14%, the little on-course bookies only 3% these days. 550 on-course bookies in Australia. Probably used to be 5,000, 6,000. I'll read this to you. Betfair offer in-play betting on a variety of horse racing events. There's been some controversy over alleged broadcast delays of up to 5 seconds. And then they'll say, no, we're declaring all those bets off. And they just don't pay. The practice of what you're talking about, Drew, in sport, was a tennis match of, we know one of them, Duchovny or something his name was. Anyway, it was a tennis match and they detected one player was very ordinary, one was pretty good, he was seeded, 14 or something. All the money was on the outsider and they smelled a rat. Sure enough, the outsider won, and Betfair said, well, we're not paying. To the stage that Betfair left England, so they now don't come under the control of the Gambling Commission, and they've set up in Gibraltar where no one can touch them. And they just make their own rules as they go along. Now, I don't mind them not paying someone that's cheated, but they didn't pay all the little punters that wouldn't have had a clue, that just had their little bet, knowing nothing was going on. They didn't get paid either. And just for those little punters, they reckon there was £32,000 involved. So. Yeah, so I'm going to close on this note. The racing industry is the 3rd biggest employer in South Australia. You want slide 11? And not only is it the 3rd biggest employer, and we have trouble getting the government to understand, we employ a lot of people that are otherwise maybe unemployable. You know, that they've got limitations of mucking stalls or something like that. But they all get paid, they all get an award rate. I've tried to cover all aspects of gambling. I hope I've succeeded in giving you some better understanding. So unless there's any other questions, I'll shut up.